Brent Porcio, TopVelocity.net. Going to do a 3x pitch BioMetrics here of Theo. We got him at 57. Coming out of leg lift, we're going to look at the hip angles. You can see drive leg is really internally rotated. Yes, a lot of momentum at this point, but the drive leg knee is collapsing. Ideally, we want to be in more abduction than this. If you see the green check, 8 degrees of abduction, we'd like to be around 40 so we can keep that knee out. That would keep the knee out in external rotation. So this is a bit of a collapsing of the knee, and then what happens is you can't generate a lot of power. You can see there is extension coming out of it, but the lift leg's trying to kick, and it's creating a lot of the hip rotation energy going into front foot. So you can see hip rotation wise, there is a lot of counter rotation here. We've got minus 39 degrees of counter rotation, so that hip is closed past the 0 mark, 90 being open. So 90 being here, 0 being here, and there it's at 42 right here. So a lot of counter rotation, just not a good stable leg to accelerate on. We want to hold more abduction, more external rotation. So like I said, the lift leg is trying to create a lot of the energy. So we should be able to see that in the kinematic sequence, which should be messed up. For example, with the red dot is the peak hip. We'd want that going first, then the blue and the green. And we can see the blue is the arm, lead arm, and then the green is the trunk. That's all going off before at front foot strike, and then the hips are peaking. And you can see the hips are trying to drive at that point, but it's too late because the trunk is already in sync and there's no separation. So that's when you have the lift leg trying to create the energy, then everything syncs up and flies together. In this case, you even see the hips peaking well after the trunk peaks, and we want it in reverse, actually. So we need to hold stability so we don't have to be so aggressive with the lift leg, and we can then drive through the back hip and separate to where the red peaks, and then the green peaks pretty fast. I mean, you can see the peak hip speeds are at 600, peak trunk speeds are like 925. You know, they're even a little low. Ultimately that would increase those speeds as well. If we add it to the linear speeds, you do see the hip linearly, because all that good momentum peaking right here coming out of leg lift, but then it stops after that. The trunk kicks in later, but this is way after pitch release, so it looks like things on the linear aspects look good. You can see Theo's definitely moves better linear than he does rotational, but because of the sequencing being off, right there is pitch release, and you can see the trunk speeds at pitch release are actually lower than the hip speeds. If this was pitch release right here, where the green line is at the top and the trunk speeds are up, that would be awesome. So if the arm was just coming into internal rotation here, that would be awesome. But that's not happening because there's no separation. So it's really being able to take both of these sequences and improving the angular kinetic sequence on the left, and that will take all his good linear power and get that energy into the ball when that trunk peaks. So we need to work on that timing of hip to shoulder, which is based on the back leg stability. If we look at the hip angles to the chest angles going into front foot, we can go see it before leg drive. The pelvis is back, leaning back 18 degrees. You're not really in your posterior chain here. If your pelvis is too tucked under you, leaning back, I would want a little bit of this is the case where I'd want a little forward lean on the trunk and the hips, because that's going to better load the posterior chain. And you can also see right here when Theo hits front foot, the hips are still back and the trunk is back, which is fine, but we see the front leg is in an internal rotated position. So it's really not stable until that leg goes external, which is right here. So you can see he's trying to stabilize the knee, stabilize the hips before even rotation begins. That's really hard on the arm. And then when he gets to pitch release, the trunk is 25 degrees contralateral, which isn't bad. But we're just only 18 degrees of the forward tilt. So if we had more separation, ultimately, due to the front leg not flying, the front leg would land more in an external rotated position, would stabilize hips earlier, hips would open earlier, then we'd have a more delayed trunk. The trunk would carry more forward, and then that would improve the kinematic sequence, linear, angular, and be significant on keeping the arm healthy and increasing velocity.